Welcome back. I'm now joined by the well-known poet and scriptwriter Javed Akhtar, the former chairman of the Minorities Commission Wajahat Habibullah, the president of the All India Majlis-e-Ittihadul Muslimin Asaduddin Owaisi, the chancellor of Maulana Azad National Urdu University Zafar Sareshwala, a member of the All India Muslim Personal Law Board Kamal Farooqi, and the well-known author and journalist Sabah Naqvi. Javed Akhtar, at a press conference yesterday in Thalia, President Obama said that whilst Muslims must not be stereotyped, he then added, and I'm quoting him, "The most vicious terrorist organizations at the moment are ones that claim to be speaking on behalf of true Muslims." So when ISIS and Al-Qaeda, or closer at home, LAT, Jaish and the Tehreek-e-Taliban, claim to be the true voice of Islam, what's your answer to them?
I think it becomes the responsibility of the Muslim community, and particularly those who claim to be Muslim leaders or the saviors of Muslim tradition and religious beliefs, that they should speak loud and clear without any if and without any but, that whatever has happened is heinous, inhuman and almost insane.
And you believe it is the responsibility of the Muslim community to speak out loudly and clearly along these lines, and I assume you're also suggesting they are not doing it sufficiently.
No, I don't think I have heard voices so very clearly, because now Kamal Sahib is there, he is an important member of Muslim Personal Law Board. When somebody even remotely suggests that there should be some change in Muslim law in India, I mean, they speak loud and clear and they get totally outraged. But when ISIS or Taliban claim that whatever they are doing is Islam, then their outrage should be much more than that. But I don't see that kind of outrage. They do it, but I have yet to see that anger.
Wajahat Habibullah, I'm going to pick up on that point made by Javed Akhtar, because it links up with something else President Obama said. He said Muslims must push back against extremism. They must challenge some of the thoughts and rationale of the extremists, particularly when it's ISIS. To what extent do you agree with Javed and President Obama?
I would agree with the President entirely, but the point is, also of course I agree with Javed Akhtar that you're not finding that. Why are you not finding that? That is what you have to get into. Most Muslims, of course, strongly disapprove of what is happening. I mean, 99% would probably do that. The people who are the extremists, maybe 1%, maybe a little more than that. But why do they not speak out? Because they themselves feel, because of this rambling Islamophobia which has gripped the West. The reason why this is happening has its roots about a century ago. It's well documented as to how this started, because President Obama also asked this question, why did it start? That's an answered question. It started after the First World War. I don't need to go into that.
But the point you're making is that the rampant Islamophobia of the West prevents Muslims, particularly in the West, speaking out.
That is right. That's right. It discourages Muslims from speaking out, because then they feel that when you're not talking about the things that have provoked this, but on the other hand, you're condemning them, your co-religions, for having participated.
Let me bring you in on that one, Mr. Sareshwala. Is it in fact, as you heard Wajahat Habibullah claim, that the rampant Islamophobia of the West prevents Muslims speaking out because then they look as if they're toadies of the West? Or is it that because they don't speak out, there is this Islamophobia because the West says, why aren't you speaking out? Why isn't your voice heard? Which of the two is it in your eyes?
Karan, actually, this kind of extremism within the Muslim community, I have seen more in the West. I have lived in England for 7 years. I have traveled across Europe. The kind of extreme view which I have seen there was unheard of in India.
It's an important
In fact,
point.
when I went to the UK for the first time in 1992, I did not even know that this kind of extreme view exists in Islam. Same thing in the US. So the extremism within the Muslim community always existed in the West. It was never in India. In fact, even in the subcontinent, we did not find this kind of view. Even in Pakistan, even in Bangladesh, it was not seen, not heard. And yes, about Islamophobia, what Wajahat Habibullah Sahib said, the kind of utterances in the mainstream newspapers in West, particularly in Europe, the people of Bajrang Dal and VHP cannot dream of. The hatred towards Islam which is there, prevalent. I have seen, I have heard
All right.
the statements which come from, particularly in France.
I want to.
But anyway, whatever the reason could be, there is no justification.
I want to.
But
We've lost.
I'm coming to the point which was raised by Wajah
We've lost.
Sahab, that this kind of extremism is more in the West, less in the East.
Okay, that's a good point. Mr. Sureshwara, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there because I want to bring into the show someone who actually has had the courage to speak out forcefully as Javed Akhtar would have wanted to. And that is, in fact, Asaduddin Owaisi. This is what Mr. Owaisi said, and it's in the Economic Times today. Islamic State is a blot on Islam. We all need to condemn ISIS activities, and the world should understand that it has nothing to do with Islam. Now tell me, Mr. Owaisi, why is it that you can speak out so clearly, loudly, and other voices, particularly those in the West, hesitate to do so? Is it because of Islamophobia, as Wajad Habibullah says, or is it because, as Zafar Sureshwala suggests, you have a much more extreme form of Islam in the West compared to the forms we are used to?
No, as far as my information tells me, the Islamic scholars in Western world have spoken out against ISIS, not once but many times. Islamic scholars in UK belonging to the Shia school of thought, or the Barelvi, or the Sunni, or the Salafi, have come together and condemned ISIS. But Karan, please understand that Mr. Obama has no moral right to talk about the Muslim community. A country which butchered 10 lakh Muslims in Iraq. Mr. Obama has no moral courage to tell the Jews to stop persecution of Palestine. ISIS has been created because of the wrong policies of US in Iraq, Libya and in Syria.
Our discussion is not about Mr. Obama having the moral right to give the advice he does. He may not have that moral right. I'm not contesting that point with you. Others may. I'm actually talking about whether the advice he's giving is right, whether he has a moral right to do so or not. Do you believe Muslim voices need to be heard, speaking out against fundamentalism, extremism and terror? Answer that for me, because you've spoken out.
No, please understand that ISIS have killed more than 150,000 Muslims, which include renowned scholars of the Sunni world, from the Shias, scholars. They have, I mean, who's the main people who are in the firing line of the Shia, of the ISIS? It is not the US or the so-called Western powers, it is the Muslims who are being persecuted day in, day out over there. And it is the Islamic scholars who have spoken out against ISIS. And please understand that ISIS is a perversion of Islam. They have nothing to do with Islam. They have rebelled against the 4 schools of thought of the Sunni Islam. They have nothing to do with Wahhabism. In fact, the Grand Mufti of Makkah have called them the #1 enemy of Islam.
Let me then put this to you. Is the reason why Muslims abroad, Muslims in a diaspora, and this applies, by the way, to Hindus in a diaspora too, become so conservative, orthodox, traditional, and therefore extremist, is because of a sense of A, alienation from the mainstream, which they don't fit into, and B, they yearn for their countries which they can't return to. And is this therefore an emotional reaction which needs to be understood before it's criticized?
Karan, first of all, I think there's a difference between conservatism and this kind of violent extremism. There are different histories. Many Muslims in India are very conservative, you know, and it's very unfortunate that every time there's a terrorist attack anywhere in the world, all the Indian Muslims sort of are asked to pass some kind of nationality test, and we're all sort of asked to speak out. This force called ISIS only damages Muslims wherever they survive, however they survive. I don't know what Javed Saab is referring to, but broadly speaking, I can't think of anyone who will not condemn it. These are outright rapists, murderers, killers.
Let me bring in Mr. Akhtar, because Mr. Akhtar, you're hearing from Asaduddin Owaisi, you've heard it again from Sabah Naqvi, that in fact Muslims don't hesitate to criticize ISIS, Taliban or extremism. She wants to know, Who and what are you referring to when you claim that the voice of criticism is neither loud nor clear?
No, I appreciate that they have done it and they are doing it okay, even in this program. But the fact remains that the path that takes you to that fundamentalism goes through the area of conservatism. It is not in watertight compartments. These are only stages and degrees. We have to see that by and large, people who are somehow opinion makers within Muslim community, or they have some claim over the interpretation of religion or Muslim aspiration, I see them that they don't push the Muslim community towards progressive and more liberal ideas. They take them towards more conservative, more regressive school of thought. And ultimately this is, that is cancer, this is death. So ultimately it will lead to that.
Okay.
What are we doing? People, these important boards and majlises and so on, are they giving progressive, liberal, forward-looking ideas to Muslims? The answer is a definite no.
Let me go to Kamal Farooqi and then I'll come back to you. Kamal Farooqi, to what extent is there a difference in Islam and its attitude to extremism in the claim that Sufi Islam takes a different view, Wahhabi and Salafist Islam takes a different view? You've heard our Prime Minister in Wembley extolling Sufi Islam. You read Western papers attributing the responsibility and blame to Wahhabi Islam. To what extent is that distinction part of the explanation for the fact that some voices speak up and others remain deafeningly silent?
Any school of thought in Islam, be it Sufi or Sunnis or whatever you call, or any followers of any of the Imams, in fact, no one has got any sympathy with these kind of terrorism, because Islam is very clearly said that under no circumstances this will be allowed. Whosoever are they, I was about to 100% okay what Javed Bhai has said in the beginning, but suddenly he again goes back to some other thing, in fact, which is not relevant over here. As far as the Muslim community, I am talking about more about Indian Muslim community, and I, with respect, I don't agree with Sabha also, in fact, because this is not, we don't want to give any certificate. This is what actually Islam is, and here we have got all school of thoughts, be it Sunni, be it Shia, be it Hanafi, Shafi and all of them. India is the only country which has given the unanimous fatwa about these so-called jihadis, and they are talking about taking the name of Islam. Absolutely, they are anything but the Muslims. They have, as far as Asad Owaisi is concerned, is absolutely right. They have nothing to do with Islam, and I am saying it with complete authority, with complete understanding of Islam.
You may be saying it with complete authority and understanding of Islam, but let me stop you there, because Sabah Naqvi, who is equally, I believe, a Muslim as you are, wrote the following sentence in the Economic Times this morning. Many experts on radical Islam believe that it's Wahhabi doctrine that has birthed Osama bin Laden, the Taliban and the IS. She's clearly making a distinction between the Sufi Islam you heard the Prime Minister extol in Wembley and the Wahhabi and Salafist Islam that I said earlier was often deafeningly silent. Sabah.
Karan, I just want to say I think we are confusing issues over here. There is no doubt that there has been state patronage to certain Deobandi institutions within India, whether it's a Muslim Personal Law Board. I don't want to go there. And I think Javed Saab is confusing the issue a little bit. He's such a brilliant, talented man. He's talking about conservatism within those who presume to speak for Indian Muslims. But that actually has very little to do with ISIS. ISIS comes out of a different reality, and I don't think we should mix up all these strands that we are dealing with right now. ISIS comes out of the context of what's happened in the Arab world. The US does have some responsibility for it. The issue of, I am actually on Javed Saab's progressive side when it comes to the issue of conservatism for those who presume to speak for Muslims within India. But we shouldn't confuse the issues, because I don't think we should link it all up. These are all parts of different strands, So,
Asaduddin Owaisi, President Obama raised another question. I'm going to quote it before I ask you what your reply to the President is. He says, I do think that Muslims around the world, religious leaders, political leaders, ordinary people, have to ask very serious questions about how did these extremist ideologies take root. In other words, Muslims must look into their souls and their hearts and ask themselves, how is it that some of our brethren in some countries have become extremist to the extent that innocent people having a drink or watching a music concert or sitting in a restaurant get killed?
The answer is clear.
I'll come to
Karan, let me, before answering, let me correct Sabah that the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia has said that ISIS is #1 enemy of Islam. Wahhabi scholars have condemned ISIS. The ISIS have rebelled against the four schools of thought.
You made that point earlier.
As far as Obama,
come to Obama,
as far as Obama's point is concerned, I wish Mr. Obama had read and heard what Hillary Clinton had said to the Senate House Committee, wherein Hillary said that we used all these so-called these buffoons, these jokers who call themselves Mujahideen for our American interest. Mr. Obama conveniently forgets what Hillary said. Mr. Obama conveniently forgets that
he
they
may
used
well have,
Osama
but
bin Laden.
why don't you answer his question?
No,
should Muslims look into their souls and ask themselves the question, how is it that some of our brethren have become so extremist to the point of killing innocent people? How do you answer that question?
I would answer that question in telling Mr. Obama, stop telling us, stop advising us, correct your own US policies. What is good for you at one time is good. What becomes bad for you, you impose on Muslims. It is you, your policies which have created ISIS. It is you, your policies who have created this turmoil in the whole Islamic world. It is high time that the US does some introspection and stop lecturing the Muslims.
Let me put the point that Mr. Owaisi is making, and he's made it not once, he's made it twice. And that is to say, Obama has no moral right to give us advice. Obama has no moral right to ask us as Muslims to look into our souls and ask why there is extremist for some of our brethren. Does Obama have no right to speak in this way? And secondly, should Muslims be doing what Obama says, looking deep into their souls?
Well, I addressed that question when I first answered you, but I didn't go into detail. The point is, these ideas, these extremist ideas, developing among Muslims, particularly in the West, in West Asia, is an injection of the colonial period after the First World War. It is well documented. I would recommend to all your viewers and the participants to read David Fromkin's A Peace to End All Peace. It started then. It started with the British at that time, and yes,
can I stop you? Therefore, can I stop you? So what you're then suggesting is that if Muslims were to look deep into their souls, the answer they'd come up with is that these extremisms and the sympathy that they get is all because of colonial history. Yes. And therefore, the fault goes back to the West.
Not because of colonial history, because after that it has been developed after that. You see what has happened in Afghanistan, the fall of the Soviet Union. So Owaisi Sahib is not wrong at all in that. But does that not give President Obama not the right not to question it? Yes, but he must also see that while he's rightly, and we should look into it, as to why we succumb to this, but then he should also see how far he is responsible, and that brings us into the modern period.
Stop. In other words, you're saying that it's not just the Muslims who need to look deep into their souls and hearts. Obama needs to look into his own, and Western leaders need to look into their own.
Entirely.
I'm going to go back on that point to you, Javed Akhtar, because there are two issues involved here. Firstly, there is Asaduddin Owaisi's claim that the West, not just Obama, but the West has no moral right to be advising Muslims. And then there's secondly the point made by my colleague here in studio, Wajahat Habibullah, that in fact if the Muslims should look into their souls, so must the West, because the West and their colonial policies have started the alienation and bitterness that today is leading to terror. So we have a chicken and egg situation.
I think it is not either or all. Yeah. No, this is not either or all.
Correct.
Both. The fact is, on one hand, yes, I mean, Taliban is the classical example of that West involvement. They were American financed madrasas. The books used to be printed in USA, and the book which has won Pulitzer Prize, Ghost War, has given complete details of it. So their involvement, Taliban were invited by Mr. Reagan in White House, and Mr. Reagan said that these are the Thomas Jeffersons and George Washingtons of Afghanistan, and so on. So they have definitely used, nurtured, created such kind of forces for their own convenience or immediate short-term advantages. There is no doubt about it. But when the dog starts biting them, then they feel uncomfortable about it. There is no doubt. But on the other hand, I'll come back to my original point. You see, when it becomes totally indefensible, obviously all the Muslim spokesperson and Muslim leaders have to condemn it. Today, with what face anybody can say that this is right and this is wonderful? Obviously you have to condemn it. But on one hand, of course, the West uses you. But why you get used? What makes you usable? That is your fundamentalism. That is your conservative attitude that makes you vulnerable for this use. If you will bring more liberalism within the community, whether in India or outside, if you will bring progressive values, more elbow room for dissension and so on and so forth, the young man will not be vulnerable, who can be kidnapped and made into Mujahideen or Taliban or
That's
ISIS,
a good point. Kamal Farooqi, you made a lot of effort to defend the attitude and response of Indian Muslims, and I'm not contesting what you said at all. But I want to give you the example of Azam Khan. And if I'm correct in my memory, you were once in the same party as him. And this is what he said. We need to look at who killed whom first. After that, who retaliated. History will decide who is a terrorist and who is wrong. That, in a sense, is taking the sort of answer you heard from Wajhat Habibullah to an extreme stand. Evaluate history, and that will decide who's the terrorist and who's not.
Karan, and that was the reason of my very short stay in the Samajwadi Party, which I left fortunately at a very early stage. Now, what actually, I want to make a very clear-cut statement. There is no if and but. Whatever Obama says, whatever Tony Blair had done, whatever France could have done, why should we be stupid to get into this at all? This is my duty to tell my children, this is the duty of all the Muslim ulamas and the leaders to say very clearly that this is not Islam. If you are going to this way, you will be straight. You are going a wrong path. And all those people who are doing it, they are Jahannamis, because Islam does not allow this kind of thing at all. That must be told very clearly, and all of us must speak in one voice, which we are speaking. I don't want any kind of explanation. This has been done because Libya, now Tony Blair, after butchering so many lakhs of Muslims, now he's saying this. I don't want to come into that at all. I just want to say one single statement. All my Muslim brothers and sisters, all the leaders, religious leaders, political leaders, they should not speak in any way what Azam Khan has said. Because this way, if we speak even a small line on this, people get on us. We have to say it, and we are saying it. We are condemning it. They have nothing to do with Islam. They are not Muslims.
Zafar Sareshwala, you heard Kamal Farooqi say loudly, emotionally, in fact passionately, that we as parents, we as Muslims, we as imams, we as leaders have to tell our children and teach our children the right Islam and direct them away from the influence of the wrong Islam, be it ISIS or be it extremist fundamentalism on the net. Do you sometimes find that parents don't do it, that imams don't do it, that actually leaders of society shy away from doing it? In other words, we don't do what's expected of us.
Yes, Karan, we need to do three things. First, this whole radical Islam is a misnomer, because Islam stands for moderation. The Prophet has said, lead your life darmiyan ravi. The word used in hadith is the middle path. Even in war, the hadith says, even if you are at war, you cannot kill children, you cannot kill women, you cannot kill old people, you cannot desecrate place of worship, you cannot destroy agriculture. So Islam is all about this, what we believe. So our duty is threefold. First, we need to educate our children that this is the true Islam.
Second,
and that Islam is Islam of Quran, Islam is Islam of the life of the Prophet.
The second?
Second, we also need to educate the world that this is not Islam.
And the
We
third?
need to fight ideological battle with these kind of people.
And the third?
So these are the three-pronged jobs which we have to do. Of course, a lot of people have been doing, but we need to do more and more.
All right, I'm going to take a break at that point. When I
And
come back,
all
I'm going
the
to
three
put to
fronts.
my panel the way Islam is viewed in the West, and sadly, the way Islam is viewed by many in our own country as well, and ask them how do they respond to that, and what do they believe is the solution to tackling this particular perverse perception of Islam. We'll be back in a moment's time. Don't go away.
Nisagama mani pamaga ni pamaga sani pamani sapasa जहाँ तक याद आती रहेगी